So, Megan, tell me what Christmas stories you have.
So when you first asked me to do this, I had three stories that came to mind, and it's sort of like a Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future thing. So it fits along with the Christmas Carol theme. So one of them is when I was a kid. The other one was when my kids were a little younger, and one of them is a little more present day, but kind of what my future Christmases I think are going to look like. So the one from when I was a kid is the first time that I think I realized Santa was not real. And I lived in South Dakota. My siblings and I loved to go sledding. We had like a little track that we would build a sled track in our front yard every year. And we would build snow forts and have snowball fights and stuff. And that was all super fun for us. So we also had one of those big conversion vans. And it was one of those that had like the two seats in the front, two seats in the middle that kind of swiveled around.
Captain's
and then the back,
chairs.
yeah. And in the back, there was a bench that you could fold out into a bed. And we used to take lots of road trips. So we were always in this van. And behind the bench, there was a little like place where you could hang clothes. And then there was also like this little sort of sink area that you could put ice in and then put a topper on it. And that would be like your cooler. So it almost acted like a refrigerator on road trips and stuff. It's kind of cool. But I just remember one day we were on our way home from church and we were messing around in the back seat and my parents were distracted up in the front seat. And we were looking out the back window, waving at cars and trying to get semis to honk their horns and stuff. And I looked down at that little storage area and there were a bunch of sleds back there, like standing upright. So I could see that there were sleds back there. And I got super excited because I was like, oh my gosh, Mom and Dad bought us sleds. You know, I was so like happy and excited thinking that they were going to give us sleds right now to play with. And when we got home and we were like, okay, we're going to go outside. We're going to go play in the snow. And they didn't say like, oh, I got you some sleds. We were like, oh, well, maybe those are a Christmas gift.
Right.
And then a couple days later, my parents were getting ready for something. I can't remember what it was. And I went up into their bedroom and they were both in the bathroom, like doing their hair or whatever. And I went into their bedroom and I looked around the corner and I could see that there was a TV set up and there was a VCR underneath it. And I knew we didn't own a VCR because it was back in the day when you could rent a VCR and we would rent a VCR every other weekend or so and play videos. But this one didn't look like a rental. It wasn't in the big case and everything like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a VCR. And so I was talking with my brother about it. And I was like, Mom and Dad have a VCR. And he's like, oh, I bet that's a Christmas present, you know, or whatever. So Christmas morning, we wake up and there's a TV set up in the living room with the VCR there. And we had to just like pretend like we were so excited because it was the first time that we were seeing it. And we had to pretend like we were so excited for the sleds. And honestly, it was a little like disappointed. And it taught me to never, ever go looking for Christmas presents again, because I did not want to know. I wanted to be surprised.
Yeah, the surprise is better than being sort of like in the know.
Yep.
At first, the knowledge seemed good, right? But then it just went away. And then what was your next story?
And then also, I am a little bit of a prankster. So this is the story of how I made one of my children cry on Christmas Eve. We can laugh about it now, but back then it was pretty traumatic time. I started doing Christmas PJs for my kids. I can't remember when. At some point, the grandparents loved to help out with that little tradition. And I liked the idea of like they could open their Christmas PJs on Christmas Eve and then all the bigger gifts would be saved for Christmas morning, where it was a little more exciting. So I started that tradition of doing PJs on Christmas Eve. But one of my sons, when he was about 7 years old, he thought that was the lamest present in the entire world. And he did not want PJs for Christmas. And
I was 7. I understand.
Yeah, I've been 7. And as a boy, I'm sure, like I get it. So even we had a tradition of like writing a list for Santa, like what are your gifts and all of that stuff. And then we would, we would pretend to mail it and all of that. And he was very emphatically clear on his Christmas list, do not get me PJs. He said like, dear Santa, here are the things I want. And he listed them. And at the bottom in big letters, he said, he put PGs because he didn't really know, PJs. He was very emphatic about that. And every time I asked him what he wanted for Christmas, he would say, not PJs. So what I did is instead I got him a little miniature Lego set and I wrapped it up and set it aside. And then I had like a standard box that the PJs came in. It was like those standard clothing boxes that you get from department stores. And I put some like just some of those cushy wrappers that come with the Amazon boxes, like the little air filled pouches. I put them inside the box and then I wrapped the box. So under the tree, there were 6 identical boxes that were obviously Christmas PJs, but his box was empty. So we went to go open Christmas PJs that night, and everybody at the same time went and opened their boxes, and he opened his and it was empty. And he was so upset that he started to cry. And I thought it would be just a funny joke, and I said, well, you said you didn't want Christmas PJs, so I didn't get you Christmas PJs. And he was very upset. And then I got sad because I made my son cry on Christmas Eve, but I went and got him his Lego set, and then he could open that, which sort of made up for it, but not really. Go ahead.
Moral of the story, don't give your kids freaking empty boxes on Christmas when they're like 8 years old.
That was perfect timing.
Yeah, we could leave that in.
Totally leave that in. He's 18 now. As you can see, he's sort of almost he almost has gotten over it.
PTSD, though, still is a thing for PJs.
12 years later.
PTSD.
Yeah, that's right. PJTSD.
A little bit upset.
I don't blame you.
I had a similar experience that you'll learn about when you watch our Christmas special to see everybody else's Christmas. Now, was there another one still, or were the two?
Yeah. So the last one is a little more of a heartwarming story. The first one was a cautionary tale. The second one was a sad story, and this one is a little more heartwarming, Christmassy. I got divorced several years ago, back in 2017, and the way that we set up our holiday time is that we were going to exchange at noon on Christmas Day. So every other year, I would have the kids for Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, and then the following year, I would get them at noon on Christmas Day. And the first year, I had my kids with me for Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, which was great because that first time of getting divorced was so volatile. I was so grateful that one thing was the same for me. But the next year, I knew I was going to be facing not having my kids on my favorite night of the year, where I had planned and prepared and all that. And all of our traditions and rituals that we did together on Christmas Eve, I would be alone for that. And I would wake up alone Christmas morning. And I was really, really sad about that. And the prospect of facing that. So instead of just, sitting there being sad and lonely, I decided to call up a friend of mine and say, hey, what are you guys doing for Christmas? I'm going to be without my kids. Can I come hang out with you Christmas Eve? And they said, well, Christmas Eve, we're going to someone else's house. But they said, Christmas morning we'll be together, with our kiddos, and we would love to have you come. And it happened to be, they're the parents of some of my former students. So two of their 3 kids I had taught in high school. And so they were some of my favorite students. I was super close with them. So I thought that sounded like a great idea. And so I got up on Christmas morning and went over there, and they had this lovely brunch prepared, some lovely mimosas, some of my favorite foods, and they're some of my favorite people. And one of their traditions is on Christmas morning to talk about the most important lesson that they had learned over the last year, or the most significant life change that they had gone through over the past year. And it was such a beautiful conversation with these 3 adult children who have very, very different lives, and they have very different goals for themselves and different values and everything. But their parents raised them, without religion, and they were able to just find happiness without it. And so I was still in the church at the time, at least, mostly in the church. I hadn't resigned or anything. And so it was really cool for me to see kids who had been raised without religion finding happiness in their adult years, and also still having a high sense of morality, and also still having a deep sense of wanting to be good and do good in the world. And I came away from that conversation just feeling like that was one of the most beautiful Christmas mornings I've ever had, even though my kids weren't there with me, and I just will always be grateful to them for allowing me to crash their Christmas day.
Yeah, it's so nice to realize that the "where will you go" mantra is just wrong. There are
Yeah.
beautiful humans everywhere,
Yeah.
and we're grateful for all the beautiful humans that we know inside and outside the church, where maybe as members we didn't know that those beautiful humans existed outside the church. Thanks for sharing these stories. We're going to go back to the show now and hope everybody that we cut back to doesn't know that this happened, but we'll see how the rest of the show
Pre-recorded.
goes. Yeah.
Well, I want to just say thank you so much for doing this, Jean, because last year actually was my first Christmas as a non-literal believer. And it was really hard for me to figure out how to do Christmas. And I stumbled across RFM's Christmas show where he had several people just come in and give their little blurb. And it was so important. It was another year where I didn't have my kids on Christmas Eve and I was by myself. And I just needed that. I needed it so much, that sense of community and other people who are going through what I was going through. So I'm so grateful that you're doing this.
Well, thank you. And I'm very happy to do it. Yeah, I am modeling from RFM, and we're lucky to be in Tim's living room sharing these stories.
Well, thanks again for inviting me. I appreciate you.